Right, we're down here at Revival Wellness Centre, I think it is, or Revival Studios, or whatever it is. It's bossed out, isn't it?
Revival, yeah.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the first time I've been in here, and like, you're doing your cold water dips here, and
and the breathwork I've started.
And the breathwork.
And this is where we do our wellness retreats.
It's
So,
absolutely stunning here, isn't it? It's a bit of me now. This is it.
We'll be in
Makes
here
me
all
want
the
to be. You've got to take your shoes off when you come in. Like I was going to
Put
my
me
mum's.
in the dojo.
So it's our first ever podcast, and we spoke about it, haven't we, for absolutely ages about getting it done. And
I think it's something we've spoke about for a couple of years, probably about 2 years now. Maybe thought about getting it started up, and feel a bit nervous though.
Nah, you know what? It's just about us, as always, just sitting down having a good conversation, and we're good at that, mate. Once we get going,
You know what?
I
I was speaking to someone before, and they were like, "Oh, you'll have no problem." I said, "No, because if anyone is being break free, like I don't stop talking. Like there's one thing I can talk about is this." I said, "But I'll probably get in there and freeze."
Nah, you won't.
No, I doubt it.
You get in the water, you will. So I thought what we do is, obviously me and you, we talk about break free and how it came about, and obviously myself and you, Marcus, we've known each other for decades. Through recovery, really, and through bits of the nightlife, and you being the head doorman on Mother Care, Baby Gap. But so we've been in and out of each other's lives for a long time. But lots of our connection was in recovery, wasn't it? And it was the Lighthouse Project, I think, when we first
started was the Lighthouse Project.
And there was meetings there, wasn't there, when we used to do with Chris Farrell, who we'll give a little hello to tonight. And people say to me, how did Break Free come about? And I think it was born out of a passion of would you say it was the technique? Do you think that sort of the fact that there's not much awareness around the technique we use?
I think if you just said there, we've been in each other's lives for a long time, but a massive amount of that time we was both in a bad place.
Yeah,
we've seen each other at our worst and our best.
Yeah, you're right.
But we'd go through phases in recovery where you'd be doing well, then I'd be doing well, then you'd relapse, then I'd relapse, and then I'd go missing, and then I'd come back and you'd be there, and that was sort of our relationship for years, like absolutely years. Of seeing maybe one of us doing well and then failing.
I think a lot of that, Marcus, as well as and the reason we were so passionate about setting up a program like Break Free, which has got such a high level of support, which comes with massive amounts of workload and stress, doesn't it? It does.
Absolutely.
But I think that's born out of that. All we had was a meeting a week, wasn't it? Like, we would see each other every Thursday if we turned up.
Yeah.
And there'd be times we'd be doing really well. We'd get lengths of time under our belt. And then there's times, as you say, where one of us would go missing again and go back to the life of misery. And I think we know how hard that was, wasn't it, with that level of support. There's I
just can't, me personally, now again, we're using this platform just to share our experience. Now, this is our perception on things and this is our experience. This isn't to say this is the only way, but this is the way that worked for us. This is the way that's working for hundreds of people who we've helped. But there's other approaches and there's other ways to do it. And we're very passionate about this here because we tried everything. And this works. And it's working for a lot of people, so we wanted to be very passionate about sharing our experience. But when we were doing it meeting to meeting, that's an hour or an hour and a half a week. Now, when you've created an addiction, you've created habitual patterns and it's an addiction and there's behaviours. Whether or not you sit with someone for an hour a week and they'll give you the right information and it'll even make sense in that moment. But then between that hour and that hour 7 days later, you've got no one there to guide you or help you, or you're not actually applying the things that you need to do in between those spaces, and you might get some information and you can just reverse all that over them next 7 days. Yeah,
I think what the reason we're both so passionate is there's so much to learn about addiction, isn't there?
Yeah.
Do you know, like, we talk about how the addiction, developed. We're very passionate about that, aren't we? The fact that this addiction develops.
Yeah.
There's other programs that will have other theories, but ours is, we're quite passionate about the addiction developing. My social use when I first started taking drugs, and I say this, and people get a bit surprised sometimes and say, "Well, how can you speak about your use like you enjoyed it?" Well, I did at the start.
It's pleasure.
Of course.
Reward.
Of course.
That's how it becomes addictive.
Exactly. So my use led to abuse, which developed into an addiction where there was no enjoyment in the end at all.
Yeah.
And I think when we speak about that so openly and honestly and say, when I was taking drugs and I had no responsibilities and I was a younger lad in 1988, 89, and I was up and down the country at illegal raves and the early rave scene, and I was taking ecstasy and I didn't have any responsibilities and no children, and the consequences weren't there. But that use led me to abuse, led to cocaine. The use led to abuse, which developed into an addiction where, for me and the likes of yourself, there was zero enjoyment in the end. It was just pain.
Yeah.
And that place you often talk about, where you are getting no enjoyment out of it at all. The consequences that are happening are terrible, but you can't stop.
Yeah.
You sum it up as a really, really painful place.
It's as we were saying earlier, we went through a lot of services looking for answers. I mean, I was in service. I was trying to stop for 15 years.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
It was pretty much around the same. So I wanted to stop, but the answers that I was looking for didn't really resonate with me, or the level of support that I needed. And you know what? Sometimes I did get the right support, or sometimes I did get the right answers. I just hadn't had enough.
Yeah.
I was still trying to hold on to this pipe dream where my addiction would convince me that at some point
there was another way.
There'd be another way. You'll be able to drink. I'll be able to moderate if I just don't use for so long. And so a lot of the part of that time was not blaming anyone else. I hadn't had enough. I was still holding on to this dream that I'd be able to moderate at some point and then engage with me addiction.
I think, though, it's only when you get to understand and have the awareness around addiction that you can look back and know what that was. Yeah. That was your addiction.
So what
talking you out of committing to never again. Our programme, Break Free, there's no one day at a time with us. No. Is there? There's no moderate. There's no will you be able to drink again at some point. This is a lifelong abstinence programme because, as you said, I tried everything. My addiction convinced me that there will be a way that you in the end will be able to moderate your drinking. You'll be able to maybe use once a month. Wait till you just go away. Don't do it at home. Don't do it in work. Just do it when you're on holiday. Stop drinking the next day. Change your drink. Don't carry on the next day. Just do it on a night out. Okay. Wait till you've got something to look forward to. Just do it with your missus. Don't do it when you're out with the
Just take other drugs.
Yeah, anything.
Don't have a drink. Just do this. Just take tablets. Just drink tablets and water. And it would always frantically be looking at ways
to stop you
stopping holding on in some way. Yeah. And unless you're aware of that, because it's how can you control something that you aren't aware of?
Exactly.
How can you fix something that you don't understand? Like the analogy I use around a car. Like I could get in a car and turn the engine on. Now, if my car didn't start, I could tell you it's broke. I could look under the engine. It's just metal and wires. Yeah. You could even say to me, I'll give you £1 million, fix that car. Right.
I'm the same.
I'd try.
I'd be lucky to get the bonnet open.
Yeah, I'd try and fix that car. I put 100% effort in, but I couldn't fix it because I'm not a mechanic. I don't understand cars. That's how I used to feel. It's like something is not right in here.
Yeah.
Like, how can I be adamant I'm not going to do this again? Like, the thing about addicts, if you've ever been around one, why they're so believable is because they actually believe their own lies at times.
Yeah, that was me.
There's times when you're blatantly lying.
That was me. How many times in the moments have you when you've been drinking, using, there's chaos, carnage, you've smashed the trust at home, you haven't gone home, your missus is looking for you, your partner's looking for you, you haven't gone to work, you've turned your phone off, utter carnage has hit, you're in your mum's, there's everyone's looking for you and there's absolute chaos. Then you finally get found, you finally have to face the music, the consequences are on the table, and in that moment you are convinced that's it for me. Yeah. I'm done. I promise, and you're promising your missus, work colleagues, everyone. And in that moment, you genuinely believe it.
Mm. Because in that moment, the part of your brain where your addiction is just the same part of where your hunger is for food. It's like if you're starving, and then if you overeat, the thought of eating anymore is like, oh, no, I'm full.
Yeah.
When anyone has their moment, it's always after the use. So you've absolutely abused drinking drugs. The appetite, it's satisfied. The reward centre is at its fill. You're then left with the consequences. Because the part of the brain where consequences isn't the part where the addiction is. You're then left with the absolute chaos
I always say that
you caused. That's why when you say to someone, I'll never do it again, because you mean it in that moment.
You genuinely do, yeah.
In that moment you mean it, which is why you're so believable.
Sitting in the rational part of your brain. Yeah. You're in your frontal cortex, but when the midbrain, the addiction's being fed, and it's caused the consequences, it never deals with them.
It's quiet.
You have to deal with them then. Yeah. And that's a very dangerous place to be. That's where when when the midbrain, the addiction's being fed, and the frontal cortex, you, the real you, the part of your brain that actually does want to quit, is now picking up all these pieces of carnage and chaos. That's the place when people can really look, you know, like yourself. You share your story a lot. Suicidal thoughts come in because you're in such a dark place there.
Yeah. I think where the suicide come from for me was what we we're just talking about. Years of that. Years of adamant. I am never doing this again. Losing kids, absolutely ruining everyone and everything, and hating the people I love and promising them time after time and meaning it. You even get emotional talking about it, and hating everyone over and over again. Feeling like I can't trust a thing I say. Never mind anyone else. I'm breaking promises to myself. Eventually, after doing that for so long, I lost all hope that I was going to be able to stop. If you lose hope as a human being, it's a dangerous place to be, because it was like, I felt like I didn't want to die, but I felt like I couldn't carry on living like that. And I felt like, I can't do this. I give up. I lost hope in the end.
And that's the dangerous place I speak about. And when we talk in our programme about, you know, the addiction, and when you're myself or you speak, Marcus, we always, when we're talking about the addiction, it's always a separate entity. We always, even when I speak about it, and people who don't have the awareness around addiction or the way our technique is, they say to me, "You speak like about the addiction like it's separate from you."
Something else.
And I say, "Yeah, well, the addiction doesn't understand consequences. Never, ever, ever is your addiction gone. You know, you need
have a drink, you know, but you'll go to prison.
Yeah. You
lose your kids, you know, if you have a drink tonight.
Yeah, have a drink, you know, and you'll have palpitations.
You know, if you have a drink, you will have a line, you know, you will hang yourself, you know.
Yeah,
never that. It's what we're talking about is I do it like that. It's like my separation between me and my addiction now. It's basically like someone leaning over my shoulder going, all right, to have a drink on holiday. It's like, because the problem that me and you had is, and a lot of people in addiction have, they don't have that separation, because you'll promise, I'm never going to do it again. Now, if you think those thoughts are yours, biologically we're designed to follow instruction from the midbrain. It's what keeps us alive. We're biologically designed to do that. So if you then start getting thoughts around, you know, I won't go mad, but it'll actually use the chaos that you've just caused to convince
Mine used to do that.
You won't do it again.
Once I'd caused utter chaos and carnage, and that was like Friday to Monday, and then the Tuesday I'd be in the pits, and then Wednesday I'd try and maybe go and mend and put the fires out that my addiction had caused, and beg me missus to let me back in, and promise the world, and finally put my phone back on and deal with work and the situations then people had let down, and then be promising in them moments, I'm done, you know, I promise I'm never drinking and I'm never taking drugs again. That's it for me. But it'd only be Friday before the addiction would be talking to me again. But as you say, if you're not aware of what that is, or that voice is, and it's saying, you know what, it's the derby Saturday, it's an early kick-off, don't do what you did last week, and it would show you the misery. It would agree with you. That was ridiculous. That was. I mean, that's why it's so miserable, because you just go overboard. It's an early kick-off if you just have a couple in the afternoon, and once that whisper, and you've engaged with that,
it's like a salesman.
You know what statement you said at one of the meetings, and it always sticks with me: the silly salesman that sells misery.
Selling misery, and it's the most convincing salesman in the world. Because for 20 years, it was selling me the same misery week after week after week, day after day sometimes, and I'd buy it.
Yeah.
Because, again, without awareness, if you think you want to drink, and if you think that you'll be okay to drink, and you'll have a drink and you won't use drugs, or you'll go on, if you think that's you, then you'll agree.
And it's not knowing that that's your addiction talking. It's not knowing the argument, the two parts of the brain. Like the groundbreaking moment for people in our program is sometimes is in the introduction groups when people join us, and then they're in an intro group where there's videos about the technique and understanding bits of the science around the two parts of the brain that are arguing with each other, and just that alone makes people go,
light bulb.
Wow. So I'm not arguing with myself. So that argument, that battle, people, the words we hear a lot: craving. Rattling, climbing the walls, itching. We say to them, they're nonsense words. They're nonsense words. You're not arguing. You're not rattling. You're not itching. You're not climbing the walls. You're not craving. You're just arguing with your addiction.
It's what we talk about, the engaging. Because again, without the separation, you fall into like negotiations with this stuff.
And that's
like
where the danger
salesman,
is.
Go on, you'll be able to think, well, I won't go on, we'll drive, and and once you're engaging in that thought, then your reward centers will kick in. You're actively engaging with your addiction, offering you drink and drugs, and you're negotiating terms on how mad it's not going to be and how okay you will be.
Yeah.
But again, from the science part of it, once you start engaging in that thought, your reward center will start to kick in. It's anticipating reward. Every time you've engaged in that thought in the past, the neurological pathways in your brain light up. That has resulted in bucket loads of dopamine.
Yeah.
So when you're starting to engage in them thoughts, the reward center kicks in,
just
and that's where it starts.
For people that are watching this, that thought process that we talk about and our techniques, based around this science of the two parts of your brain that are at war and regaining control. Yeah, you're not powerless. You may feel like you are at the start because you've lost, you have no awareness, you have no separation, and you keep losing that argument. People listening to this or watching this now will go, God, you know what? That voice that talks me into a different ending that I don't get.
Like, they'll notice the longer they talk to it, the more the battle is.
So this is what I want you to explain, because this is your strong point when it comes to the science and stuff. That conversation that some people, including me, at one point thought I was having with myself. So Derby's on at the weekend. That's an early kick-off as well. Now, I got to know my addiction so well that it wouldn't mention drinking drugs and I'd know where it was going. Early kick-off Saturday for the Derby, isn't it? Your missus is in work. Just that. Yeah. I would know my addiction so well that if I engage around this conversation and it takes me, it will go, she's not in work. She's in work till 9 as well. And it's an hour 12 kick-off. And you know what? You've worked hard the last couple of weeks. I mean, you've shown you can stop. So there's a little hint about drugs already. Why don't you have it just get a couple of beers and get a few beers and watch the game. Don't use, but just have a few beers. I mean,
use the amount of drink, the time you start, what time they'll be.
So my question to you is, if you hear me talking about this conversation now and my addiction saying to me, it's an early kick-off and your missus is in work till 10, and if you've shown a couple of weeks now and you've worked really hard, and even the boss in work said and such, and you booked a nice holiday away, and you don't switch off really, so why can't you just have a couple of beers? And if you are going to use, make sure you use early, and then only get such and such amount. At that point in that conversation, is the dopamine already getting released?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm asking that question so you can explain that, because that's where it gets very difficult, as you say, to come back.
It's once you're engaging in the thought, and once them thoughts gain enough momentum, at that point your reward center is anticipating reward, which then will start dripping.
So it's very similar, and it's the same part of your brain, and I'm prodding you here because you're very always brilliant at explaining it. Same part of your brain that thinks about food if you're hungry, and your mouth will water. Absolutely. It's the anticipation of food for your dinner. What should we have? Do you fancy a steak? Yeah. Why don't we get a ribeye and a bit of peppercorn sauce and get some onions on it? And by the time you start talking about it and thinking about it,
it's like MasterChef. I could eat me tea, put MasterChef on, and if I'm watching so many cakes and I'm engaging in them, it's like, oh, I'd eat one of them now. Or you're walking through town at Christmas and you smell that donut fan, it's like, the smell of it kicks in, I might get some of them. But from an addiction point of view, it's, when people talk about what you were saying about addiction being developed, it's like abuse of drinking drugs or abuse of substances change the neurological pathways in the brain. Now, over time, this affects the reward center. Because whenever you do something from a point of view, from a survival drive, so anytime you sex, water, food, fluids, anything that keeps you alive, your reward center will give you an instruction for you to act on. You act on it, and as a reward, it gives you dopamine, a little bit of pleasure, for you to be motivated to carry on doing those things to keep you alive.
So basically, the midbrain, the survival drive, that's responsible for keeping you alive.
Yeah,
drink. Food, sex,
keep them warm, go on the toilet,
breathes for you at night when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
You don't have to remind yourself to breathe.
Absolutely.
The midbrain, the survival drive, does that for you. That part of your brain has been tricked into thinking it needs drink or drugs to survive, which is why even when you're losing everything you love and you've hit what people might call rock bottom and everything's an absolute mess, this thing will still ask.
Yeah.
Because it thinks it needs them to survive.
Absolutely.
And that's why if anyone's watching,
you're not going mad. It's not as easy to just go, I'm not going to do it no more. The consequences of the using isn't enough.
Yeah, so
it's like if we said, right, none of us are ever going to eat food ever again. Your brain wouldn't compute
stop asking you.
Yeah, it's like when I was on a diet, when I'd done that boxing fight, I had to lose a stone, but it didn't mean that I didn't get hungry. Consciously, I was like, I
that's
need
what
to lose
the
weight.
reason I'm speaking like this to make it quite clear with people is if people are watching this for the first time and they don't know about this technique that we use, AVA, they may be watching this going, wow, that we've touched on that part of your brain that where the addiction develops, that survival drive. Tell me a little bit about the frontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, the part of you that's reached out, the part of you that's desperate to quit, the part of you that just wants to stop.
So if you're going back to the reward center, the repeated stimulation of the of these new pathways that you're creating through drinking drugs, this will then develop an addiction. Repeated over time. What it'll do is, as well as this dopamine receptor, so when you do this repeated over time, we're pleasure seekers, so you get more dopamine from drugs that you're actually getting from food. So then you will keep on repeating these, which will become habituated. I imagine like a habit with the dopamine dependency. It's like these things, and then it will take over any hobbies you've got, any relationships you've got. Because what happens is, when you're overstimulating these things, you exhaust like the receptors in the brain that actually regulate your reward system. The more and more you abuse drinking drugs, and the brain has not evolved to deal with that much dopamine in the system, you exhaust these transmitters, which then basically means that when you're not drinking and taking drugs, you then stop feeling any sort of pleasure or fulfillment in day-to-day life, relationships, hobbies you used to have, connecting with people. Just day-to-day life, you feel like you're not experiencing any pleasure there because you've abused the reward center. You then even stop getting the same amount of pleasure from the drug you're addicted to, because then you then start taking more of that drug to get the same feeling. That's what tolerance is. So the more and more you're abusing the drug, the more and more you're affecting the way your brain is wired, the more it's affecting your behaviours, because your behaviours have to adapt to keep your survival drives going, which then, if you look at anyone who you know in addiction, look at me and you, the first time I went out and had a drink and took a drug to the last time I drank and took a drug, the difference in me as a person was night and day.
Yeah.
Because the more and more I was in addiction, and the more it consumed me, the more and more I hardwired these pathways into my brain, the more my behaviours changed, the more my personality changed, the more psychology of playing the victim, and everything I'd done in the end was just a way of keeping this addiction going, and it was just so consuming. But what you're saying there, it's like saying, for example, when you get hungry, it's like, oh, I'm starving, I might get something to eat. I know, I'll order it, Just Eat. Basically, part of your brain is recognising that you need food, and it's sending an instruction to the other part for you to act on it.
Yeah, and that part there, that's talking about food, is the same part where your addiction is developed.
Yeah.
So it will keep asking, no matter what the consequences are. So anyway, as I say that to give people hope who were maybe watching, who were like, I just don't understand, like we were. I don't understand why. I'll give you an example. One, and I've shared this in our group loads of times. There was a time in ours where I'd been sitting up all night. My obviously addiction in the end developed to such a point where there was zero social aspect of my use. My cocaine and drinking led me to a place of just isolation. It would be me on my own at home, or maybe if I'd been kicked out or I'd stayed out, then in someone's flat or room, alone. Everything turned off, palpitations, paranoid, almost psychotic and scared whilst I'm using. Yeah. Awake for days on end. My wife would come down and I would be in the back room, telly on mute, drinking, using, and she'd come in and see me, and she said to me once, why do you spend all that money to feel like that? You look scared. And I didn't have an answer.
Don't know why.
And that's that place you talk about of like, I don't understand why. And the reason I want to talk about it the way and letting you talk and explain it is, there is hope. Don't go, I give up hope because you can't understand why, when you're desperate to quit, when your life is such a mess through drinking and taking drugs, why is this thing still asking? That's why, because it's in your survival drive. Yeah. It thinks it needs it to survive, so it will still ask. The good news is there is a technique where you can completely regain such awareness around your addiction that when you spot this thing, you're then training your brain to actually see the truth. That's which is what we're training people is to see the real ending.
Because we've conditioned the brain. We've conditioned the brain with to formulate this addiction by consumption of drinking drugs over time after time. We've done these things, and you've hijacked your reward system. You've added something that shouldn't be there. As you say, your brain is tricked into thinking it needs drinking drugs like it needs food. So consciously just saying I'm not going to do it no more, regardless of how bad things get, which is why I never chase this.
Your midbrain, the addiction, will never agree with you.
It's got an insatiable appetite to just drink and take drugs. It's like if anyone's ever been on a diet, it doesn't matter. It'll still
and I'm
ask for
hoping
food.
someone watching will listen to that and go, right, okay, so that's why.
Every addict will have asked themselves that. Why am I doing this?
That's why.
That's the horrible feeling.
And that can be a huge relief to someone watching this to just go,
understanding why.
Oh my God, so I'm not going mad. No. I'm not arguing with myself. No, you're not. The two parts of your brain
is just like it does when you're hungry, is just asking you for drinking drugs. Now, for me, I had to, the way we set the program up is we come across the AVRT concept. That concept made sense to me. You and the addiction, right? That makes sense. But it still wasn't enough.
No, it wasn't.
I had that book for 10 years. I must have read it 100 times, if not more. And I could get so far. But I kept on falling into patterns of relapse and become a serial relapser in the end. There has to be more to it. But when I understood the science behind it like that, I'm like, right, okay, that's what's going on. Okay, that's why that's happening. That alone was like my brain knew. I wasn't, that if you have a question and you don't have an answer to, your brain will repeat that on loop. It'll make up answers for you. It'll worst case scenarios. When you know, right, this is what's happening, right, okay. For me, it was, there's the problem. Okay, what's the solution to that?
If we talk about break free and what it actually, so the people watching this and going, I wonder what's involved with break free. It's a level of support that we just don't give the addiction a day off, do we?
Oh,
we don't. We are, with the team we've got our own recovery hub now, which is amazing. We've got a huge team. How many's in our team now? 30?
33.
Of team of support. And it's 24-hour support because, as you say, addictions don't have a day off. You can make a decision to quit, have a level of awareness, but could be in work, have an argument at home, and all these emotions, arguing, good news, bad news, lovely weather, bank holiday, and the addiction steps in and goes, I usually get fed when I ask you.
It's paired associations.
Yeah.
All of
these
hundreds,
things.
If not thousands of things.
I mean, I could sit here and name to you. It'd be harder to name something that my addiction hasn't got a paired. Liverpool win, Liverpool lose.
Yeah.
Drinking use. Lovely weather, pissing down. Bank holiday, worked hard, work shit. Arguing at home, things are great at home. Like good news, bad news, grief, brilliant news, baby being born, anything at all. My addiction would go, you know what, reward, or it would say, you know, that's bad news, isn't it? Have a drink, take drugs.
The problem with that is as well, is you're not regulating your emotions. So we have mechanisms that help us regulate emotions, and every time with good news or bad news, anytime we end up any sort of uncomfortable state, we drank and took drugs as well.
So this is where the midbrain just automatically sees these situations and goes, right, I ask now, and I get fed, and it will keep asking. Yeah. So the reason our program is so, at the support level so high, is because in them moments, everyone in our program has a fingertip support, don't they? Like in that moment, you could be in our program and go into work and the boss is in a terrible mood, speaks to you badly, you get upset and the addiction goes, you know what, you can't even have a drink now you're in that program. In that moment, people have the ability to take a call, to voice it, to put it in the WhatsApp group. We have fingertip support in any moment, don't we?
And
which is huge. Which is what, when we started this conversation about, we had a meeting a week and maybe a phone call.
A meeting to meeting, and if anyone who's been in addiction understands the torment, it's relentless. Like thousands of thoughts a day, hundreds of thoughts, constantly paired association, feeling like you're always in a battle. Like when recovery's like addiction and recovery is like that, it's horrific.
Yeah, that's what we're passionate about, aren't we? We're like, there's white knuckling it, we call it, where you're not drinking or using, but you're just miserable. You're clinging on. You're not doing it because you're going to get kicked out, or and this is
you're not drinking because of the consequences.
Because of the consequences,
the addiction constantly keep on tormenting.
That isn't for me. No, it's not breaking free from your addiction. No. You know, when you are constantly just hanging on, it's asking you, and you're battling, but you're not using or drinking. That in the end will make you push the fucking button. Yeah. That's what we're not about.
It'll grind you down.
Yeah.
Because when we're talking about this, when we understand, okay, that's where the addiction's coming from. Now, I'll say this statement, like, and I'll stand by it. Every single relapse I ever made, and I believe anyone, it's a bold statement, isn't it? Considering how many people are in the fucking world, but I'm going for it. I'm putting myself out there to get abused here, right? Every single fucking relapse that's ever, that anyone has ever happened, has all been from a thought that they didn't control and they engaged in.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I go from here to the bathroom without thinking about it? How do I go and eat without thinking about it? How do I get from here to a pub drinking?
The analogy I use half the time is
thought.
it's coming from the same part of your brain that is responsible for eating to keep you alive.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go home tonight and I have steak and chips and peppercorn sauce and sweet corn, that hasn't just appeared on my plate. There has to have been a thought about, right, I'm hungry. What should they have to eat? Engaging with that thought of hunger.
And then you start to
right, okay, do you fancy this? Have a conversation. Love, why don't I go to Butcher's and get such and such, such and such? There is a train of thought and a conversation which leads to that meal being there. It's the same way as it leads to the cocaine being in front of you or the alcohol. There, it starts, what you're saying, with one thought.
So if you look at it from a point of view where...
We're catching the thoughts, aren't we? That program is about catching the thoughts.
If you have separation, like there's me and my addiction. I don't drink and take drugs no more, but this is going to ask. And if I'm fully aware of everything that this is doing, every time the salesman goes, you know, you'll be all right to have it. And I can catch every first thought and I can control that thought, I'll never relapse. And I stand on that. The only way you relapse is if you don't catch the thought, you engage in the thought, you think that it's you engage, anticipation, desire.
The deal gets better. The ending that it's selling you is not the one you're going to get.
And the science behind that is the more and more you engage in it, the less rational you become. We need to be in the prefrontal cortex. Up there, we're rational. This is where we make good decisions. The more and more you engage in the reward center, the more in an emotional state you go, the less rational you are, so that you lose control bit by bit. And the more and more you engage,
you genuinely believe the deal that the addiction is offering you are going to get. Just a few. Don't go mad. The match is on. You'll be in bed by 9. The missus is out anyway. Kids aren't here. You're all right. You're all right to stay up till 12. You'll definitely go to sleep. You're not going to use. Just have a drink. It's the cocaine that's making you weird and wired. Just have a drink. You'll be fine. And once you're in there,
once you've engaged on that level, the anticipation is through the roof. Anticipation to reward. The dopamine is in the system. You're obsessively, the part of the brain that's in part with OCD, like that, a completing task, that is obsessively, anyone with an addiction will know what we're talking about. It becomes obsessive. It's all you can think about, see, and the anticipation through the roof. And in the end, you lose rational control and it's a fuck it.
Fuck it, yeah.
And then you use...
Because the deal it's offering you, the silly salesman that's selling you misery never mentions the misery. So our programme, this is the great thing about, you know, when we're talking about Break Free now and the 24-hour support and the fingertip support you've got in them moments when you know we give you the awareness to recognise your addiction. Well, it's okay recognising it, but then you need a set of tools to be able to compete against it.
Awareness isn't enough. You need to be aware, but you need, as you just said, tools to be able to control it and basically go from your addiction being your habit to your recovery being your habit. The way I think about drugs, drinking drugs, the way I talk about it when my addiction comes in, catching them thoughts and controlling them.
For me, now, like people say to me, like, how can you be in your industry? You're out clubs, festivals, and don't you struggle around drinking and taking drugs? And mostly they ask me about drinking. Don't you ever? Yeah. There's no desire for me at all, none. Like, I couldn't think of anything worse than drinking or taking drugs because I've trained my brain now to see the truth. I know from getting lengths of time under my belt, from learning the hard way, from that the only ending I'm going to get if I choose to drink or take a drug is utter misery. And not just for me, for my family, for everyone, everything that's around me. But not just that, all the amazing rewards that my recovery has brought me. The amazing rewards, fitter, stronger, healthier. Me marriage, me as a granddad, me as a dad. Creative, ambitious, wealthy, healthy, loving, thoughtful, trustworthy. All these things I could rattle off. All I'm ever doing is giving them back and taking back the misery in return. So for me, there's never a problem, but it's not just my industry. We have this, don't we? Everywhere. Like, I do 21st, 40th weddings. I've been and done wakes. I've done funerals. I've done baby showers. Like, everywhere you go now, people are drinking and taking drugs. Yeah. You want to do your recovery properly and live your life battle-free. You need to do it properly because it's everywhere. People are drinking. You have to
rewire your brain, and this is why our program it's not for the faint-hearted. Like, it's intense. No. We are intense, and there's but
Marcus, I am adamant that this program will give you a level of freedom.
Well, that's the thing.
Freedom.
If you've had enough and you want peace and freedom and being content and not falling off your wagon, and I can't go there. I can't do that.
Not being scared to go anywhere. I can go wherever I want. I know I'll never drink or take a drug again.
Totally and utterly comfortable with your decision that I'll never drink or take a drug ever again. And what you just said there is important. Human beings don't chase pain by design. We'll chase pleasure. If you only see drinking drugs
I just
as
see the
pain
truth.
and misery, why would you struggle not having misery?
That's the amazing thing
That's
about
what
it.
our program does. It reconditions the brain to see drinking drugs as something that ruined the life. It's not a reward.
Yeah.
But like we've had people reach out, a lot of people reach out this week, can I join the program? I'm desperate for help, but I'll join after Christmas. And I'm like, why not start now? You want to get Christmas out the way? Because they're still in that mindset that they won't enjoy, because at this point early on.
I'm made up you've touched on that, because you hear me talking about this a lot. You know, we've just spoke about the voice, the addictive voice that talks you into drinking and using. It'll never mention the ending. It'll never mention the truth. It'll never mention the misery. It's got to talk you into a different ending, and then you get the same miserable ending. We're aware of that, and lots of people now listening will go, wow, I've got a bit of separation just watching this. I'm aware of that voice. Yeah. So that's where it's coming from. That's how there's the science. But I also talk about the same voice that talks you into it is the same voice that will talk you out of recovery. Yeah. How many people do we know, me included, many years ago, many times, we have lots of people who reach out, who are desperate to quit. But then when we say, okay, here's the website, sign up, they don't sign up. Yeah. Like you're saying, I'll start after Christmas. Give the addiction a chance to talk you out of it. And the same voice that talks you out of it will just talk you back into drinking and using. How many times do we hear, the meetings aren't for me. I can't do I can't do a meeting every week. I can't get to a Saturday morning walk. Yeah. I'm not sure this is for me. You know, I don't really like WhatsApp groups. Yeah. Like, that is, the addiction will do anything it can to talk you out of it.
You know, I can't do them walks. I've got social anxiety. And I say, it's funny I didn't have social anxiety when you're getting into like random drug dealers' cars at like 4 a.m, people you've never met, drug dealers, meeting them on street corners. Didn't have anxiety then. It's because the survival drive. It's like if I leaned over now and cut your oxygen off, your midbrain would panic because you need oxygen and you push me off. So when you say to someone goes, I've had enough, I need to stop. And then we go, right, join this program and you're never going to drink or take a drug ever again. Panics.
The addiction shits itself.
No, oh God, I can't do that. Yeah. And then what it'll do is it'll just like it's been doing for years. It's the psychology of it is. I talk about this victim mentality because it was me, and I don't mean to ever offend people when I talk about it. I was the biggest victim mentality. I blamed absolutely everything and anyone for my using, things that I blatantly created myself. Other people's reactions towards me for things that I was doing, then blaming them for my using, my relationship with my kids, not seeing my kids, losing jobs, my mental health. Where let's touch on that, which again will cause a shitstorm. But if you're in addiction for 15, 20 years, 5 years, whatever, your life will start falling apart. So you do have things to be down about. But when we're talking about dopamine, the thing that regulates your mood, your motivation, your concentration, your exhausting through drink and drug abuse. So then you're not experiencing pleasure. So then what happens is you go into a depressed state, an anxious state. And I was like that, Lee, for probably 10 years. And I was in that state for that long that I was convinced that I'm just depressed. And the only time my brain would go back to balance is when I was drinking and using.
When you look at it rationally, like you said at the very start of that, we see it with people who come and join our program who say the same. I'm really depressed. And I look back and like, if I'll just talk about me, if I'm drinking and using the level I was, hardly sleeping, and I'm getting kicked out, and my missus has had enough of me before I've had enough of drinking and taking drugs, and I'm losing my marriage, and I'm losing me as a dad. I can't see my kids. I'm in my mum's. Work's falling apart. I've bought a bar which I've lost. I've had to remortgage my house to get it. Financially, my life's a mess. My marriage has fallen apart. My missus has gone to a solicitor's to get a divorce. I'm going to be fucking depressed. Absolutely. But we see the difference in people. Once you stop drinking and taking drugs, it's amazing how quickly things can turn around.
Because you are in a depressed... I mean, I hung myself. I committed suicide. So I was in a depressed state. Like, I was not in any rational mind. But I was exhausting the things in my brain that regulated my mood. I was putting myself in a depressed state. My life was a mess because of my drinking and using. My brain wasn't functioning the way it was meant to function because of my drinking and using.
You know, when we talk about the
But then I
addiction.
went to a doctor.
The addiction asking again once it's caused absolute carnage and it's even got you to attempt to take your own life, Marcus. Can I ask you a question on that? How long after you'd attempted suicide was it before your addiction asked you to use again?
I used 4 or 5 days after that, and the thought was, you've already lost everything now. You'll never get out. I know what the thought was. Just have a drink. You won't have a line. Like, that's what made you try to do that. You won't do that. And so basically what it done is my addiction kept on abusing, drinking drugs to the point where it would be like, well, in the end, I felt like I was so far in, you'll never get out. The only way out is suicide. Then that didn't work, and it was like, oh, well, you're already fucked anyway. You might as well just carry on. You've lost everything. You're up to your eyes in debt. You're this, and it'll be like, well, just have a drink.
I'm
You
guessing
won't
at that
have a
point you had no separation really, and you thought that was you.
I was just so consumed, and I'd give up. I'd lost hope, and I'd been in recovery for a long time. Even at that point, this was a couple of years. I had a decent level of understanding of addiction, even at that point, but I didn't have enough. And even the stuff that I was aware of, I weren't applying. Like, information without application has no value. Even the stuff that I did know I wasn't doing, my addiction over time, just beat me into what I felt like submission, and I just give up.
If we wrap up about the programme, anyone who's watching, anyone maybe who's just had a little think about it and listened to how the technique works, how a little bit of science about the brain, and lots of people I think who watch that will go, wow, you know what, I understand a bit now. I'm aware of that voice. The programme is 3 meetings a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Each person who joins will do one of them meetings. There's a Saturday morning walk, isn't there, where everyone in the programme comes together. There's gym sessions. There is 24-hour support in WhatsApp groups.
Gyms are Monday, Friday, Sunday, so there's something on every single day.
I think not only do we have an amazing level of awareness and understanding and science around addiction, and you will get to understand addiction so well that you will start to regain control and build up so many rewards that you won't want to hand them back. But the community aspect for me is huge. It's
like the opposite to addiction is connection. Like the isolation part of it, you said in the end you're drinking and using on your own. Even when you're with people, you feel alone. You're not really connecting with people on the right level because you're probably surrounded with other addicts who you're all using and abusing each other, or then you're actually around your family, but you're so switched off from people.
We are quite passionate about being able to enjoy your recovery because you know what, if you think about it, think how miserable your life was in addiction. So you then make a decision to quit and join a programme that's going to give you a level of understanding and awareness. With normal sound people like us, we've got every young girls, young lads, old fellas, like lawyers, nurses, solicitors, brickies.
We've had other drugs counsellors come on, and we've had every single...
But what we give you is a real community of knowledge and support, and I think that's massive for me. I think that's huge. You know, if anyone's looking at...
But remember our meetings, me and you connected straight away. We got on straight away as soon as we met, but we weren't allowed to speak to each other outside of that room. So it was a very lonely place, recovery, when we were doing it, because it was, you can't go to match, you can't go there, you can't have a phone, you can't speak to your old mates, and then you also can't speak to these other people who you're in this meeting with because, and I get it, you know what I mean, because there's no one sort of managing the conversations you're having. But then that's a very lonely place of like, well, I'm not drinking and taking drugs, but I didn't have any other life. That becomes very lonely, and that again, it gives your addiction an advantage because it's like, fucking, this is no better. I've done that for 12 months. And I was like, I'm fucking just as miserable. What we've done with the programme is we offered people the level of support that we wish we had. Okay, you've got your meetings, you've got your walks, you've got your gym classes, hikes, sober events. You've got 24-hour support. Every single time you get a thought, you catch that thought, you put that in that group, and we will cognitively recondition.
And there's more tools. We don't want to go into all of the tools, but obviously when we say we're training your brain to see the truth, once you catch the thoughts, that's the starting block. Being able to recognise your addiction. You know, once you have that separation and you then go, I've spotted it, I'll put it in the WhatsApp group. There's then a load of tools where we actually show the addiction the truth. We show it the real end.
It's all about rewiring, and as you said, by using all these tools persistently over time, you will rewire your brain that the way you did then. I'll never drink, it's only misery, because that's the work.
That's all,
the work
but
that we've
but
put
it's the
in.
truth.
Yeah,
I know if I chose to drink, I will then take drugs and my life will be miserable.
Yeah.
So there's no desire to do that because I know what the ending is. But I had to work really hard to train in my brain to know that, because that is the truth.
Yeah.
And people who watch and go, you know what, he's right. Every time I drink and take drugs, it's fucking awfully miserable. I know that for a fact. But what I also know is I've built up so many incredible rewards through my recovery that the thought of drinking and taking drugs and swapping me rewards for the misery, it's comical to me.
Yeah.
So there's zero battle.
And what a liberating place. Because we lived in fear of it. I was terrified of getting thoughts, because every time I got a thought I used, because I was engaged, I couldn't have no awareness, couldn't control it. As soon as I'd engaged in a thought, I was just drinking and using. I had no trust in myself and I was scared. I was lonely, I was scared, and I constantly, the longer I went in through my recovery, it was like the thinner and thinner the ice got until eventually I went through. When the fear went, I'm onto this, I can control this. But then from the program point of view, there's so much that goes into it, because it's, first and foremost, you have to develop an understanding around addiction and have the ability to stop drinking and taking drugs. First and foremost.
You've got to want to quit as well.
But you have to do that. Once you then have the ability to understand the addiction, stop drinking and taking drugs, then you've got all of this shit to look at, like insecurities, traumas, your ego, the behaviours that you've created. Because all your behaviours that you create over that time to keep your addiction survival, they don't just go. So you stop drinking and taking drugs, and what we do is we help people with the behaviours, self-worth, confidence, insecurities, traumas. We offer wellness retreats, we offer mindfulness, we've got dietitians, the whole fucking thing, because for me it's not just about stopping drinking and taking drugs.
No.
If you can't do that, nothing else matters.
You often talk about building a new life in recovery. That's so much, and that's all that's happened with me. Yeah. My commitment to never drinking or taking a drug again has brought me such an overwhelming amount of rewards that the thought of actually swapping them, and there's no part of me that wants to drink or take drugs, none, zero.
And the reward is in the journey.
It is, and that's what when I said to you,
not only we improving all the time.
Not only are we passionate about changing the stigma around addiction, and that addiction doesn't discriminate. The nicest of people can develop an addiction. People have this. They're some of the best people. They can.
The most amazing people in my life. People I've met through
social use turns into abuse, develops into an addiction where the chaos and carnage that's getting caused from the best people. So we're passionate about understanding that. You know, there should be this stigma around
people who just make some bad choices.
About addicts. People have this old school retro sort of stigma around addicts, thieves, bums.
Well, I went and done the talk in the school recently, didn't I? And when I done the talk in the school, they were like, "You're an addiction." So I touched on that. Said, "What's your perception then of the stigma around addicts?"
So we're quite passionate about changing that. Yeah. Right, so that will make more people be open and honest and go, you know what, I have developed an addiction, that's me. Like, people say to me, how many times have you seen someone reach out and go, I haven't got an addiction, I'm not using every day, but, when I get speaking to them, I say, okay, so what's your use like? Is it affecting your work, your life, your marriage, your children, your health? Yeah, they tick all them boxes. Have you tried to quit? Yeah. Can you stop on your own? No. You've developed an addiction. And that's fine. That's all right. That's
stigma. You've just nailed it. It's this. I've had 2 messages today, 2 reach outs today. I want help, but I don't want you to share me photos on the socials. And I've done a video on that. Yeah. Because if you go back 10, 15 years, the stigma around mental health was like this. No one, certainly men, can't talk about it. But it's a lot more relaxed now. People are a lot more open talking about depression, anxiety, and the mental health. There's a massive improvement on that. But the stigma around addiction is nowhere near the same, because unfortunately what's happened now is not everyone starts jumping on this statement, but a lot of people, because it's a more socially acceptable now to talk about mental health, but it's not about addiction. A lot of people are talking, hiding their addiction behind the mental health side of things. But the problem with that is if you go to a doctor, like, I've got mental health problems, they'll just give you antidepressants. It's like having a cracked wall and you're just wallpapering over it. It's like the cracks is the problem, not the wallpaper. It's the addiction. If we can break this stigma, because we're living in a society where we're fucking flooded with addictive substances and addictive behaviours, but they're made to feel embarrassed to talk about it. It's wrong. But if we can soften that, which is what we've been trying to do for years now, is soften this perception and this stigma around addiction and normalise. Like, if you've got a problem, let's normalise asking for help.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. You know what my biggest statement? You're winning when you've got your hand up. Yeah. Too many people think being vulnerable is a weakness. Like, putting your hand up, asking for help, being vulnerable and saying, I've developed an addiction. You know, it started out as a couple of drinks and a line of cocaine with me mates watching the footy. Now I'm going home and I'm hiding it behind my missus' back. She doesn't know I'm using, and now I'm using them in work. I'm not turning in, and I'm sitting in the car and I'm using in the car, and my missus doesn't know, and now she's found out and I've been kicked out and I haven't gone to work. I don't know how I've ended up here. Well, we're explaining how the addiction develops, and we're also explaining that that's all right.
And maybe giving people a bit of hope and normalising the fact that just...
There would be so many watching.
There's 34 million, I'm always reading stuff, Annie, and research and stuff, 34 million people that's suffering addiction. Like, how many people do we know? Like, it's absolutely rife. And if we can normalise, as you just say, like, people just going, listen, I've got a problem here, and then but giving people a bit of hope and belief that, look, you can reach out because there's a solution here.
And not just that, I'm quite passionate in my actions. You know, I'll always be loud and proud about my words, and across my social networks, and I always have been. Everyone I know, like, who knows me, who doesn't know me but sees me on social network, will know how passionate I am about recovery. But also in my actions, like the way I am as a dad, the way I am in work, how much of a better DJ I am, how much more sociable I am. Like, these are all the things what I want to lead on to now, just to finish this, is, so we're passionate about breaking the stigma of addiction, but we're also passionate about breaking the stigma about what recovery looks like. Like, that's what I'm trying to do in my actions, is look, if anyone who knows me when I was drinking and taking drugs will know I was a shell of a man as a dad. I was, you know the word I used for myself when I was drinking and using? Useless. I was fucking useless. I was no good to no one. If someone needed me, my family needed me when I was drinking and using, I was a paranoid, psychotic, nervous wreck. Like, I couldn't barely speak. I definitely couldn't go out the house. If something happened and someone needed me, even a family member or my children, I was hopeless, useless. As a DJ, I was terrified if I even turned up at my gigs, which I stopped doing. And when I went, I couldn't look at the crowd. I would not speak to none of the crowd. I was backstage, DJ, head down. Didn't know what I was going to play. Back now, I'm passionate about my music. I'm back in the studio. When I go to my gigs, anyone who knows me, who's booked me over the past 8 years since I haven't drunk or took drugs, will know they get so much energy off me. A million miles away from what it was. Me as a dad, me as a granddad, me on the radio. Everything I've got has come from my decision to quit drinking drugs. Whether it's personal stuff, the most important stuff, me as a dad, me as a partner, me as my husband, you know, the bond I've got and the rebuilt the trust, but also the things I've achieved, my radio station, my festival, all these things have come from my decision to quit, because I was incapable of useless of doing anything. I could not hold a job down. I could not hold my marriage down. I was letting everyone down. So I'm passionate about in my actions. Why shouldn't you be able to enjoy your recovery? You can. Yeah. It can be the best decision you've ever made, and the rewards can come quickly, Mark, can't they?
I think what you've just said there is, like, you're passionate about your actions, because words are who you want to be, actions are who you are. And when you're talking about all the rewards that come from it, the way we're so passionate about changing this stigma around recovery, not just addiction, we do get a bit of shit for that. Well, you do. Thanks for that. Thanks for taking that one for the team. I get it now. But, and I get it, I'm not judging people for judging us, because I understand it. Anyone's perception of any situation is based on their experience, their information, their emotions. When I was in recovery, I felt so unsafe with it. Like, I can't go there, I can't do this. Like, I seen it with you. There's no way he's fucking using him. There's no way they can go to them festivals and not be drinking and taking drugs. They're lying them to rip people out. And I see it. Yeah. Because their perception of it is because how they feel. Yeah. Now, I get it. But I'm not going to share my story through other people's opinion, because I've been in every service. I've experienced recovery from both sides, and I know how I feel in this recovery.
In case people watch this and think, where I am incredibly proud, and so are you, of anyone, whatever program they use. If people are in AA, the 12 steps, they're using, one day at a time. I am not judging anyone else. I'm like, I've got good mates. Loads of mates who went through the steps, who were in AA, CA, who don't drink and take drugs, and I'd save them. Like, anyone who judges other people, and I get a lot of this, and we tend to over this technique. So people will jump on and go, you can't. You're in dangerous territory. They're saying you'll never drink and take a drug again. Like,
because that's their belief.
Because that's what they believe. Like, I think it's unfair. We're all trying to achieve the same goal: freedom and peace.
We're all human beings with different experiences.
As you've said, we're passionate about
Yeah.
Not thinking, you've heard me in our meetings, I say to everyone, don't let your addiction use the word can't. It loves the word can't. It wants to paint this picture of your life without drinking drugs and go, well, you can't go there and you won't be able to do that and you can't go to the match anymore and you can't go, and what about when the lads are having the matches on in the pub, you can't go there and you can't go on holiday and you can't this and that. There's nowhere I can't go. I go away all the time.
You feel like you're missing out.
Well, it's shoulders down, wish I could, but I can't.
That's it.
It's the reason we're so passionate about recovery as well, and the stigma in that is that actually all the things my addiction at the start of my recovery tried to say, you won't be able to DJ. You can't. You'll have to pack your job in. You can't be doing fucking big club nights, and you won't be able to. What about all the holidays with your missus and then weekends away? You can't do them no more. But my addiction ruined all them things. Now, what is it we say? You don't stop doing the things you love. You stop doing the things that were ruining the things you love. All the things I'm passionate about, my addiction ruined them all. Now I don't drink or take drugs. I do all them things, and that's one of the things you talk about addiction, but also recovery, aren't we? Yeah. The stigma of that,
and that's what you touched on before. Because sometimes we get messages from other people. They're in recovery, they're in other services, and they're so passionate to improve it and put this to bed that they'll message us and go, "I'm in AA, CA, CGL, wherever, and I want to join this as well." And I'll always say to them, "Is that working for you? Are you drinking drug free? Is that working for you?" Yeah, I feel great. Stay with that. Our intentions is to make sure that people escape the misery that we once felt we were stuck in, but also give other people an alternative option, because most of the people in our programme have been to other services and it didn't work.
Yeah.
But if anyone ever comes, sometimes they come up to us in the park, I'm in another service, can I join them? Say, but is that working for you? Yeah, just stick with that, because I would never want to give someone conflicting advice, and it's not an ego trip of we're right, they're wrong. It's not about that. What is right or wrong, it's based on the person's perception.
And it's what works.
It's what resonates with you. And if you resonate with the person,
yeah.
if you're getting the right support, and if the information resonates with you based on your personality and your life experience and with the type of person you are, and that works for you, and you aren't drinking and taking drugs, fucking well done.
And
Stay doing that.
I think one
please.
of the reasons we are passionate about it is because this technique, AVA, addictive voice awareness, that break free, has and all the tools that go with it, and being able to understand the science. There's not a lot of people that know about it. Like, there really genuinely isn't, is there? No. And that's one of the reasons that we're very unique. But the level of support that we give at Break Free is amazing. If anyone's watching it and they want the website, hit them with the website, Marcus.
www.breakfreesupport.com.
There you go. Yeah. Nice.